The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim is a dumb movie that could have actually been great. The frustrating thing about it is there are actually some parts in this film I unironically really liked, and I felt were done very well, but this is undermined due to a near equal amount of dumb contrived plots, characters, and other things in the film which undermine these good moments. Now, this would usually mean the film is average if not for one specific scene that genuinely had the potential to be the best scene in the film and cause it to be lifted above the dumb elements dragging it down, but to this film's utter shame, it actually becomes the worst scene in the whole film. It is so bad that even if all other parts in the film were good, it would still have soured it and nearly ruined the film, but because the film has so many other problems to begin with, this disastrous scene utterly ruins it entirely, making it overall an astoundingly dumb film, even with the few parts that were actually good. How could this be? Well, for me to explain, I will need to go into spoilers, but before we do, there is something that you do not want to have spoiled, and that is your personal information online. So here's the thing. Your information is actually very valuable. So valuable, in fact, that there are many organizations out in the world that want to get it. And they should not have access to it without your consent, especially if they want to use that information for certain ends or distribute it. This is where Incogni comes in. It is a service that works for you to remove your personal information from many online data centers. In the US, there are even sites called people search sites that have many people's information. Well, through Incogni, you can get your information removed from those sites and many other places where your information could be exploited for nefarious means. This can really help you out against identity theft, scams, harassment, and stalking. It's genuinely a really valuable service. I've literally had people try and impersonate me online. There are real-world examples of massive loans being taken out in other people's names without their knowledge. Your information gets sold to large data brokers as well as your movements online, things you might be interested in, what you're purchasing. That's all valuable information that you should have control over. But Incogni can put an end to so many problems, and you can do it in 3 really simple steps. All you need to do is make an account, give them the ability to take your personal information off these places, and just kick back and let them work for you. It's an ongoing service where they repeatedly make data removal requests while you are signed up for them. They just don't do it once, continually protecting your privacy. It's a genuinely valuable service, especially if you value your privacy. So if you use code KNIGHTS, all in capitals, KNIGHTS, and use the link below, you can get a full 60% off an annual Incogni plan. It's a massive discount, promo code KNIGHTS, all in capitals, KNIGHTS with a K, and protect your personal information online. So thank you to Incogni for sponsoring this video. Alright, so now we are going into spoilers, so this is your warning. Interestingly enough, the main character, Hera, is not the worst part of the film. Instead, many of the detrimental elements due to her character are actually a result of how everyone else treats her. There is a disconnect between how other characters regard and describe Hera, and how they act towards her, and the actions of her actual character. For instance, the film begins with a narrator explaining how amazing Hera is, and how wild, free, and untamable she is. Not only did this come off as the same annoying trope of everyone around the girl boss character gassing them up and telling them how amazing they are.
My pride, my joy, you could rule the world. You're stronger than I knew.
But the description of Hera's character in the narration isn't even accurate to how she acts and is depicted throughout the film. I was surprised to find that Hera's character isn't actually that terrible or insufferable, although she is quite bland and boring. She has an earnest, dedicated disposition who loves her father and people, but she isn't particularly interesting, and the film does not give her any character flaws or interesting quirks. It is also desperate for the audience to want to like Hera, where she is not only regularly talked up and complimented by other characters, she is also depicted as basically always being right, and smarter and wiser than everyone else around her, and because of that she gives off very strong Mary Sue vibes. She almost falls neatly into the classic stoic girl boss archetype. If not for those times, she does show a gentle side and the fact that she is not the bestest, most incredible, unbeatable warrior. I was actually surprised how attentive the film was to show her have physical limitations. She doesn't girl boss defeat the Oliphant that she is confronted with early on in the film, but instead lures it to its own sudden death. She gets easily kidnapped by a couple of men, she needs to get saved by other people when captive, she is overpowered by Lord Thorn, and only defeats him with the help of her horse. She has utterly no chance against the troll, or was it a giant orc, I don't know, but she needs to be saved by her father, Helm, and in the climactic battle duel, she first defeats Wolf, the antagonist, through a clever tactic and use of her shield, a maneuver that I friggin' loved because it's actually historically authentic. The reason why this works is because weapons are force multipliers and helps even the physical disparities between men and women. There are cases where women have won open gendered swordsmanship tournaments, literally competing against men. Although that is certainly more the exception than the norm, it certainly has happened. And on top of that, Hera actually has an advantage against Wolf because she's using a sword and shield, where Wolf only has a single sword to defend himself. Combine that with superior techniques used by Hera, I was wholly satisfied with the final confrontation between her and Wolf, and the fight scene as it was depicted. And in the second part of the main duel, she actually gets disarmed, meaning she was defeated by the antagonist, and only comes back due to the help of her handmaid, and oh boy do we need to talk more about that wench, trust me. Hera's combative encounters were all handled to my surprise with careful consideration, and she is not an overpowered girl boss warrior. It's just how everyone else around her blows smoke up her ass and is so desperate for the audience to like her. The opening narrative states how headstrong, wild, and free she is, and that she is utterly untamable. Yet all throughout the film, she is mostly a loyal, earnest, dutiful daughter and princess. The extent of her rebelliousness is that she doesn't want to get married, and she is wild and free because she likes to go out and ride her horse. That's about it. Seriously, when she asks to go out and fight with the men when they're about to go out and meet the enemy's army, she is told no by her father, and guess what? She obeys. You know, such a wild, untamable, rebellious thing to do. Indeed, the narrator and characters around her keep regarding her as this untamable free spirit, and that she's actually a far more interesting and compelling character than the one we are given. Because Hera doesn't actually act in the way that people are describing her at all. Ultimately, Hera's biggest failing in this film is that she's just dull and mostly uninteresting, and she really can't carry the film. Indeed, the best character in the film, by a country mile, is Helm. What a friggin' legend, and he could have made the film if it was entirely about him, or indeed his death, which was so monumentally retarded and the very thing that breaks this entire film. Truly, it's hard for me to describe how stupid this was, but I'll certainly try. What makes it worse is that this comes after a part in the film I was actually starting to enjoy. The concept that the king might have risen to become a wraith, hunting and tormenting the besieging army, to be revealed that he's on a one-man journey to break the spirit and will of the enemy army by taking them on his own one bit at a time because he's just that much of a unit. That was pretty cool. And when he came to save Hera, that was awesome, and it built his character even more, and Hera showing her vulnerability that she isn't perfect or indomitable. And then it is all horribly undermined by the worst reason possible: modern ideological agenda. Seriously, I can almost guarantee that was the driving decision for what happens next. So here is how it breaks out. Helm and Hera's fight with the orcs attracts the attention of Wolf, and Hera and her father can't get back to the Hornburg the way they came out of it. For some unexplained reason. I guess the door just doesn't swing the other way, I suppose, so that is actually quite contrived. But sure, fine, let's go with it. They need to get back to the Hornburg through the front gate, and they are in the middle of a terrible snowstorm. As they run through the enemy camp, they are seen by the antagonist, Wolf, at a distance that establishes that even in this snowstorm there is a measure of visibility. This is actually an important point. People in the camp are alerted that Hera and Helm are trying to sneak through, but luckily, they actually reach the front gate without too much issue, so I guess that was pretty easy. But also a massive missed opportunity. There could have been plenty of obstacles the writers could have put in their way to justify Helm sacrificing himself to save Hera. But no, they've made it to the gate just fine. But guess what? The gate is frozen shut. Now, that shouldn't really matter because any enemy approaching the gate would be suicide and get peppered with arrows, right? Right? No! No one in the fortress decides to give them cover for what seems to be because of the snowstorm and they can't see the enemy. But guess what? They've actually already established that you have a certain amount of visibility even in the snowstorm. And they are right in front of the gate! Even with poor visibility, you could see and even hear enough of where the enemy is to shoot enough arrows at any enemy who is dumb enough to approach the gate. But the writers in this film says hold my beer to rise to the challenge of being even dumber by suddenly having no one defend the fortress at this moment. The writers are so desperate desperate for an epic last stand here, they decide to ignore reason and logic to force this contrived moment of retardation, but we're not even finished. And just remember, it could have been so easy to have them struggle to reach the gate and get to safety, have the enemy chasing them down on horseback, which means Helm and Hera wouldn't be able to outrun them, so to save his daughter's life, Helm chooses to sacrifice himself to save Hera by holding them at bay. That could have been so damn epic, and indeed the best emotional scene in the film as a father gave his life to protect his daughter, but instead, Helm chooses to commit suicide. Seriously, he decides to needlessly kill himself. I'm not joking, they both reached safety, and the excuse that the gate is stuck is so profoundly retarded. Just get some men inside the fortress, grab some hammers, and break apart the ice on the gate. But that's the thing, it's not really the ice that is freezing it shut, because Helm and Hera alone managed to force it open, just enough for Hera to slip through. Okay, if 2 people can force the gate open that much, just get the hundreds of men inside to help them open it, for heaven's sake! Instead, no one helps, but they already shown that Helm and Hera were able to open it on their own, but instead of trying to open it further, Helm literally chooses to close the gate for no reason at all, and then walk to fight the approaching enemy on his own. Why? Seriously, why? Hera is already safe now. These idiots approaching the fortress can't get to them through the gate. They can't take the fortress on their own. They are literally no threat at all. So why does Helm choose to fight them? There is no in-story logical reason for this apart from the fact that he just decided that he wanted to die in that moment. But there is a very clear external reason for this. This movie is supposed to be about Hera, not Helm. The writers chose to unceremoniously kill him off in one of the dumbest ways I've ever seen because his character needed to step aside for the empowered, independent female lead.
Rohan still needs you.
No, Hera. They need you.
You see, he must die to make way for his feminist insert replacement.
They need you.
This is made clear by the fact Helm takes the time to gas up Hera right before he dies, even saying that she is so incredible that she could rule the world because everyone must state how amazing Hera is.
My pride, my joy, you could rule the world.
Because her character is so dull that she can't stand out in any impressive way on her own. This is the writers trying to gaslight you that Hera is such an amazing character, but they lack the ability to actually write her as one, and this is what makes Hera's character insufferable. It's not actually her and her characters, it's that everyone around her in this film is so desperate to make you want to like her when she is so painfully plain and boring.
Stronger than I knew.
And yes, she's not the worst thing in the world, but the constant validation.
You think I am afraid of you?
You should be.
And promotion of her as this amazing free spirit wild character is insufferable. And so, because you can see that the writers think Hera's character is so amazing, Helm's character needed to die. He needed to be removed, and that character stopped taking the limelight of the primary powerful female lead. And the annoying thing is, if they really were this determined to kill off Helm, they could have done it in such an amazing way by having him make a truly necessary last stand to save his daughter. But instead we get this retarded crap where he literally chooses to die for no reason at all. And on top of all this, Helm continues to fight these stupid suicidal soldiers that should be getting killed by the defenders on the battlements, but still no one bothers to help him even though he fights them all night, to the point of freezing to death. Yeah, they really care for you, King Helm. Everyone literally just abandoned him, including his own daughter. No one bothered to help him one bit. They all just let him die, and I hate them all for it. And I tell you what, this scene broke me. No other enjoyable moments in this film come even close to redeeming it from this astounding, retarded slop. And then, added with all the other stupid moments in this film becomes a true piece of crap. And I am amazed because this scene could have actually saved the movie if they simply did it right. Because, as I mentioned, Hera isn't the worst part of the film, it's just how everyone keeps trying to gas her up and how they misrepresent who she is. She's actually tolerable enough, and thank goodness they made her conventionally attractive. They actually made her distinctly feminine and beautiful. So at least she was nice to look at, and she wasn't a complete total girl boss, even if her character was mostly boring. But here's the thing. There is another girl boss in this film. And who is this super female warrior character? It's Hera's handmaid, the old woman. Seriously, aside from Helm, this old granny is the best warrior in the movie, and it is ridiculous. They try and sell it on the fact that she's a former shield maiden, but no. Just no. This character could have actually worked if she was a man, and he was an old former warrior and now bodyguard to the princess, because old man strength is actually a very real thing. Old woman strength, on the other hand, especially to this level that's not justified through magic or some type of superpower, yeah, that is fantasy more unbelievable than magic and monsters. But instead, we literally have an old granny facing off an entire besieging army and winning! I'm not kidding, and it was completely ridiculous. Regarding Wolf, the antagonist, well, he was serviceable enough, but nothing special or particularly terrible either. Although his unhinged quest for vengeance, in my opinion, was not justified after Helm's death. Wolf had won at that point. He got his vengeance. His general even tells him this in the film, and his answer does not properly explain his motivations at all. He suddenly has an unhinged need to destroy Hera, even though she didn't really do anything particularly bad to him, and they had both been close childhood friends, but instead he becomes the I need to be a bad guy because the film needs him to be a bad guy, and yet they could have actually explained it. All they needed to do was show his reaction, his true unhinged rage at Hera rejecting him a second time. But they didn't really dive into that very deep. Instead, he's just the I need to kill Helm's children because I'm the bad guy. Okay, so I did mention that there were some parts in the film I really liked, but they were all undermined by the bad parts and then nuked from orbit with how they depicted Helm's death. But what were those good parts? Well, I've mentioned some. Hera wasn't a total insufferable girl boss. She struggled in combat and won through tactics, techniques, or cleverness. She was attractive and therefore nice to look at throughout the film, which did help with the viewing experience. Helm was mostly awesome, a total unit with legendary strength that cared for his people and children, but with flaws and biases that he acknowledges throughout the film, which made him a more interesting character, and his despair at losing his sons and fall into a mad, murderous rage monster, well, that was great, but of course was ultimately ruined. I liked Helm's line when he tells Hera she's not allowed to fight in the army because he was doing his duty as her father to ensure her safety. Yeah, I'm paraphrasing, but it was effectively that sentiment. The deaths of the two brothers were well set up and justified for what was happening in the story. The second brother's death in particular was emotional and effective. Hera's reasoning to wear the wedding dress at the end was justified enough, so I was able to go along with it. She chose to wear it to draw the enemy's attention so the people that were trapped in the Hornburg could escape through the secret exit passage and then pass behind the enemy if they were all focused on her. I particularly loved the move Hera used to win her first main duel or engagement with Wolf towards the end of the film, using the shield to trap the weapon, twist and disarm him, and that is a 100% authentic move with these types of shields, and I was thrilled to see it in a film done so well. Yet with all these parts that I truly did like, there were still many contrived, just dumb moments that I haven't even mentioned yet. For instance, the fact that Helm let Wolf go after Wolf had sworn that he would destroy Helm was just completely retarded. Wolf had easily committed enough treason that he should have been put to death. And to continue the story, they could have had Wolf manage to escape somehow, or better yet, Hera could have freed him due to them being childhood friends, and then she would have to deal with that mistake through the rest of the film, coming to terms with it and trying to make amends. The fact that Hera just runs into Wolf's men in the middle of the forest where she lures the Oliphant to is ridiculous. They even imply that no one goes into the forest because of the dangerous creatures in it. And so the fact that she runs into the enemy's main soldiers is just astronomically contrived and unlikely. Just as unlikely as Hera luckily noticing Lord Thorn's sigil in Wolf's base. Why did she not recognize the sigil of a prominent lord in her realm? Don't know, but luckily for her, the annoying page boy drops the pledges of the sworn lords, and one just so happens to have Lord Thorn's sigil, which she recognizes, thanks to seeing it in Wolf's space. Also very circumstantial and lucky. An unbelievable moment of stupidity is when Wolf arrives at the Hornburg with the captured son and then execute him. They all just let him go. Wolf was there with only one other man, and the Rohirrim are particularly well known for being good riders and being able to ride pretty fast. They could have easily chased him down to capture or kill him, but instead, they literally just let him go after murdering the heir to the throne in front of everyone. They try and say the Rohirrim couldn't call for aid because the enemy was shooting down all their messenger birds. Really? The people writing this movie clearly don't know what the standard ranges of bows are and how astronomically difficult it is to shoot a bird at a distance. And the other key point to understand about this is that for the enemy to get close enough to the fortress to shoot every single messenger bird that they're trying to release from it means that they would be in range of the fortress's archers and they themselves would have gotten shot. And even then the birds just needed to fly upwards easily to be out of range of any arrow fire, so this plot point is utterly nonsense. But it's actually quite crucial to justify the whole siege and why the Rohirrim can't get anyone's help. The enemy builds an absolutely colossal siege tower that's actually not a siege tower but a giant bridge setting machine. And the bridge is insanely big, so big that the way they drop it, it would have shattered into a million pieces. But at least the defenders do set fire to it to try and take it out during the siege. As I've explained here, there are many major plot points in this film that entirely rely on horrible contrivance and luck. It is lazy writing, ruins our immersion, and destroys our ability to suspend our disbelief and enjoy what we're watching. At the end of the film, Hera chooses to not inherit the throne, not wanting to lead her people, which actually seems out of character because what we were shown about Hera was that she was actually quite devoted to her father and people. Helm's last wish seemed to have been that she would go on and rule, but nah, she's gonna deny that, regardless how devoted they already showed her to her father. Instead, she's gonna go off an adventure, which really looks like the creators of this movie are treating it like an origin story for a new hero of Middle-earth. Hera, the not so strong, not really wild, not very free warrior woman that isn't really interesting in any way.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
It really seems like they were testing the waters to have her potentially be the new lead of the next phase of the Lord of the Rings franchise. I mean, aren't you excited? She's going off to find Gandalf and many adventures to come! And yes, she literally receives a letter from Gandalf at the end asking to meet her so he can ask her about the orcs she encountered and why they were searching for rings. Gandalf would have no idea about those orcs or the rings, but sure, okay, he knows, wants to talk to Hera about it. And so that is Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, an overall very disappointing and dumb film that in spite of its few good moments does not deserve its place to be counted amongst the Lord of the Rings. Those are my thoughts, and as always, stay on watch.